I knew my sister hated me, but I didn't know how far she'd go until she slid a gift across the mahogany table and laughed. A DNA test. Maybe this will explain why you're another man's mistake of the family, Ashley said loud enough for every silver fork to stop midair. I swallowed the shame, mailed the kit, and waited. Months later, when our family's estate lawyer called them for an urgent meeting about me, their faces went pale. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Most families are built on love. Ours was built on a very specific kind of silence. In Savannah, the air is so thick with humidity it feels like it has weight, pressing you down into the floorboards. That night, the weight inside the dining room was heavier than the sticky air outside. I looked at my mother, Lisa. She was staring at the condensation dripping down her crystal wine glass. She didn't gasp. She didn't reprimand Ashley. She just sat there, frozen. I used to think her silence was weakness, a form of paralysis. But looking at her that night, analyzing the data points of my childhood, I realized I was wrong. Her silence wasn't passive, it was active, it was structural. It was the load-bearing wall that held this family together. She had spent 30 years swallowing insults and ignoring reality just to keep the chandelier from shaking. She wasn't a victim of the atmosphere, she was the architect of it. She chose peace over my dignity every single time, because maintaining the facade was her full-time job. I didn't storm out. I didn't throw the wine in Ashley's face, though the thought was a pleasant variable to consider. Instead, I picked up the box. It felt light, insignificant. Ashley was grinning, waiting for the tears, waiting for the meltdown that would prove I was the emotional mess she painted me to be on her social media feeds. She forgot who she was dealing with. I am a data architect. I don't deal in drama. I deal in systems. I build the frameworks that hold massive corporations together. I fix the family Wi-Fi when the signal drops in the East Wing. I balance the investment portfolios when my father, Thomas, is too tired from the chemo to look at a screen. I am the invisible operating system of this estate. Ashley is just the user interface, flashy, glitchy, and expensive to maintain. I looked at my father. Thomas was at the head of the table, his face unreadable, his breathing shallow. He saw everything, he always did. But he remained a statue. "Thank you, Ashley," I said. My voice didn't shake, it was flat, like reading a line of code. I've been curious about my heritage. I stood up, took the box, and walked out. I could feel their confusion hitting my back. They wanted a scene. I gave them a departure. Up in my room, I didn't open the box immediately. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I logged into the estate's main server. I wasn't just going to take a DNA test. I was going to run a full diagnostic on this family. If Ashley wanted to talk about bloodlines and mistakes, I was going to make sure we had all the data points. I swabbed my cheek, sealed the envelope, and placed it in my outbox. That night, the house settled into its usual groans and creaks. But the silence had changed. It wasn't protecting them anymore. It was waiting. Weeks passed, and the silence in the house was replaced by a low-frequency hum. Ashley didn't wait for the lab results. She decided to shape the narrative before the data even arrived. It started on her Instagram stories. Just vague backgrounds, a stormy sky over the marsh, a wilting flower with captions designed to provoke concern without stating facts. "Praying for peace in our home," she posted. "Mental health is so important. Check on your strong friends, even when they lash out." I watched the notifications roll in. I didn't block her. A good analyst never deletes the dataset. You archive it. I watched as our cousins, our neighbors, and half of Savannah's social elite liked the posts. They sent heart emojis. They commented, "Sending love, Ash, and you're so brave for dealing with this." She was painting a picture of me as the unstable, jealous older sister, the chaotic element in her perfect life. She was building a cage for me, bar by digital bar, ensuring that when the truth came out, everyone would already view me as the villain. She thought she was being subtle. I thought she was being sloppy. She was leaving a digital footprint of premeditated malice. I took screenshots of everything. Timestamps, comment threads, the subtle likes from my mother. I filed them all into an encrypted folder on my private server. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed, the email from the genetics lab. I sat in my home office, the hum of my server rack the only sound in the room. I opened the attachment. I skipped the preamble and went straight to the numbers. Probability of paternity, 0%. There it was, the biological fact. Thomas was not my father. I expected the floor to drop out. I expected to feel that hollow, crushing shame Ashley had prescribed for me. I waited for the identity crisis. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, cold shift in my chest. A recalibration. I looked at the photo of my father on my desk, the man who taught me how to read a balance sheet, who sat with me while I configured the estate's security system, who trusted me with the keys to the kingdom, while Ashley was out chasing likes. Ashley thought biology was the only currency that mattered. She thought DNA was the deed to the property. She was wrong. Family isn't a biological lottery ticket you cash in at birth. Family is a ledger. It is a long, boring, expensive spreadsheet of investments. It is the nights spent in the hospital waiting room. It is the years of managing the family trust so the money didn't run out. It is the sweat equity of care. I looked at that 0% on the screen and I realized the truth. Ashley had the blood, but I had the equity. I was the one who had invested in this family. I was the one who kept it solvent. I wasn't the imposter. I was the majority shareholder. Ashley walked past my office door a few minutes later, humming to herself. She paused, looking in, searching my face for signs of the crash. She wanted me broken. She wanted me to pack my bags and run away in shame so she could finally be the only one left standing. I looked up from my screen and gave her a small, tight smile. "Good news?" she asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Interesting data," I replied. I didn't tell her. I didn't confront her. I realized that if I engaged now, it would just be a family squabble. I needed to let her overextend. I needed to let her think she had won so completely that she would stop looking over her shoulder. I closed the laptop. I had the results. Now, I just had to wait for the right moment to use them. Thomas passed away on a humid Thursday morning. The house didn't mourn him. It just felt emptier, the silence stretching tight across the hallways. Grief is a heavy, inefficient emotion, a fog that slows down processing power. But while I was trying to navigate through the fog, Ashley was already calculating the inventory. She wore her grief like a couture gown, performative, loud, and perfectly tailored for an audience. Before the funeral home had even collected him, she was in the library, pacing. "We need to plan a memorial that honors the legacy," she said, scrolling through her phone. "Something massive. I need access to the estate's liquid accounts immediately for deposits. The florist alone is going to be $10,000. I'll handle the vendors," I said, my voice mechanical. "No," she snapped, her eyes hard. "I'm the face of this family. I handle the image. Just authorize the transfer, Samantha. Stop trying to control everything." I didn't argue. I just went to my office. I wasn't going to authorize anything without an audit. That was the protocol Thomas had drilled into me. Trust, but verify. I logged into the estate's primary dashboard. The numbers scrolled down the screen, a comforting waterfall of logic in a house full of chaos. I checked the main trust, the investment portfolios, and then the discretionary subaccounts. My fingers stopped. Subaccount 4B. It was a small, low-security account Thomas kept for emergency liquidity. It usually held a float of about $150,000. Current balance, $25,000. $125,000 was missing. I stared at the screen. The transaction date was 3 days ago. While Thomas was taking his final, ragged breaths, someone had moved the money. I clicked into the transaction details. It wasn't a wire transfer to a vendor. It was a crypto exchange purchase. Ashley wasn't subtle. She thought blockchain was anonymous. But she didn't understand that every digital action leaves a residue. I traced the wallet address. It linked back to a verified account on an exchange. The recovery email for that account? ashstylemgmt@gmail.com. She hadn't just stolen from the estate. She had robbed a dying man while she sat by his bedside holding his hand for Instagram photos. I didn't confront her. I printed the logs. I put them in a folder and drove straight to Edward's office. Edward is a shark in a three-piece suit. His office is all glass and steel, overlooking the Savannah River. He didn't offer me water or condolences. He just gestured for the file. He read it in silence, then, he leaned back, tenting his fingers. $125,000, he said. Crypto. Sloppy. I want to file a police report, I said. This is embezzlement. No, Edward said. He opened a drawer and pulled out a separate file. It was thin, marked only with Thomas's initials. You don't need the police, Samantha. You need to know the rest of the architecture. He slid a document across the desk. It was an email from Thomas to Edward, dated 6 months ago. Subject: The Bait Protocol. Your father knew about the DNA test, Edward said, his voice devoid of emotion. He knew Ashley was getting restless. He knew she felt entitled to the fortune, but he needed to know if she was just greedy, or if she was compromised. I read the email. Thomas had instructed Edward to leave sub-account 4B, intentionally vulnerable. He had lowered the security protocols, he had left the password written on a notepad in his study, easily found if someone was looking. It was a honeypot, I whispered. It was a character test, Edward corrected. Thomas called it the bait. He told me, if she takes it, she loses everything. If she leaves it, she stays in the trust. Edward looked at me, his eyes cold and sharp. She took the bait, Samantha. And now, the trap snaps shut. The will reading took place in the estate library, a room lined with books nobody ever read and smelling of old money and cedar. The air conditioning was humming, but it didn't touch the humidity. It just sat on top of it, cold and heavy. Ashley arrived 20 minutes late. She was dressed in black silk, but the cut was all wrong for mourning too low, too tight, designed for the paparazzi she probably hoped were waiting outside the gates. She didn't come alone. She brought her entourage, her personal assistant, her brand manager, and her lawyer. A man who looked like he billed by the second. They swept in like they were taking the stage. Ashley didn't look at me. She didn't look at our mother, who was sitting in the corner, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Ashley looked at the empty chair at the head of the table, Thomas's chair, and for a split second, I saw the hunger in her eyes. She wasn't grieving. She was measuring the drapes. Edward sat at the far end, his back to the window. He watched them enter with the patience of a man who knows exactly how the movie ends. Please, sit, Edward said. Ashley ignored him. She remained standing, placing her hands on the table. The diamond rings on her fingers clicked against the wood. Let's skip the formalities, she said, her voice sharp. We all know why we're here. We need to discuss the distribution of assets so I can finalize the memorial plans. We will proceed according to the protocol, Edward said, opening a thick leather binder. Protocol? Ashley laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. She reached into her designer bag and pulled out a manila envelope. She threw it onto the table. It slid across the polished surface and stopped right in front of me. The DNA results. This is the only protocol that matters, Ashley announced, turning to look at me for the first time. Her smile was cruel, triumphant. Samantha isn't a beneficiary. She isn't even family. She's a fraud. That document proves she has zero biological claim to this estate. Thomas wasn't her father. The room went dead silent. My mother let out a small, strangled sob, but she didn't speak. She didn't defend me. She just shrank further into her chair. Ashley leaned over the table, her eyes locked on mine. You thought you could just sit there and inherit everything? You thought we wouldn't find out? You're nothing, Samantha. You're just a glorified accountant who overstayed her welcome. I didn't flinch. I didn't look at the envelope. I looked at Ashley. I saw the desperation under the arrogance. I saw the fear that she wasn't enough on her own. That she needed to erase me to feel valid. Are you finished? I asked. My voice was quiet, steady. I'm finished when you're gone, she spat. Legally, you have no standing. Get out of my house. Edward cleared his throat. It was a small sound, but it cut through the tension like a knife. Actually, Edward said, that document is irrelevant. Ashley whipped her head around. Excuse me? It proves she's illegitimate. It proves biology, Edward said. It does not prove legacy. He pressed a button on the console in front of him. A large screen on the wall flickered to life. Thomas anticipated this moment, Edward said. He left a message. The screen brightened, and there was Thomas, sitting in this very library, looking frail but sharp-eyed. He was looking directly into the camera, directly at us. Ashley froze. Her hand hovered over the table, caught in mid-gesture. The silence in the room deepened, becoming something physical, something dangerous. Hello, Ashley, Thomas said from the screen. If you're watching this, it means you tried to use the DNA test. I knew, Thomas said from the screen. His voice was raspy, but his gaze was steady, cutting through the years of deception Ashley had carefully curated. I knew about the DNA test 20 years ago. I knew Samantha wasn't my biological daughter, and I didn't care. Ashley let out a sound that was half gasp, half shriek. She looked at the screen, then at Edward, then at me, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. Biology is an accident, Thomas continued. Legacy is a choice. Samantha earned her place at this table every single day. She managed the accounts. She protected the assets. She cared for me when I was dying. You, Ashley? You just waited for the check. This is fake! Ashley screamed. She lunged toward the table, her hands trembling. He didn't say this. You used AI. You deep-faked this. Sit down, Edward commanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it had the weight of a gavel. On the screen, Thomas leaned forward. I knew you felt entitled, Ashley. But I needed to know if you were a criminal. So, I left the door unlocked. Subaccount 4B, $125,000. Edward paused the video. He held up the transaction logs I had printed. We tracked the crypto transfer, Edward said calmly. It went to a wallet registered in your name. You stole from the estate while your father was on his deathbed. This is what psychologists call a narcissistic collapse. It isn't just anger. It is the total, catastrophic failure of the false self. Ashley had spent her entire life building a reality where she was the protagonist, the golden child, the victim of a jealous sister. In seconds, that reality disintegrated. The facts didn't just contradict her story, they erased her. She didn't cry. She exploded. It was my money, she shrieked, her face twisting into something unrecognizable. She slammed her hands on the table, knocking over a pitcher of water. I was taking my advance. I deserved it. I'm the real daughter. She's the fraud. She manipulated him. She tricked a senile old man. She turned on me, her eyes wild. You did this. You poisoned him against me. You're a witch. I watched her screaming, and I felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no fear. It was like watching a server crash, a cascade of errors leading to a fatal system failure. She was trying to rewrite history by shouting over it, but the data was already backed up. Ashley, Edward said, his voice cutting through her hysteria. By stealing from the estate, you have violated the integrity of the trust, and by attempting to use this DNA test to disqualify a named beneficiary, you have triggered the no contest clause. Ashley stopped screaming. She panted, her chest heaving. What? The no contest clause, Edward repeated. It states that any beneficiary who attempts to challenge the validity of the will, or who is found to have defrauded the estate, forfeits their entire inheritance. The silence that followed was absolute. You mean? Ashley's voice trembled. I mean you get nothing, Edward said. The $15 million trust, the house, the portfolio, it all goes to the sole remaining beneficiary, Samantha. Ashley looked at me. For the first time, she didn't see the invisible sister. She saw the owner of everything she had ever wanted. She slumped into her chair, her mouth opening and closing, no sound coming out. The golden child had finally run out of gold. The aftermath was clinical. I didn't stay to watch security escort Ashley out. I didn't need to see her mascara-stained face or hear her final, desperate pleas to my mother. I had the data. The file was closed. Edward handed me the final folder. The transfer is already initiated, he said. The house, the portfolio, the liquid assets. It's all yours. I walked out of the library and into the foyer. My mother was standing by the door, wringing her hands. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, stripped of the illusion that her silence could fix anything. Samantha, she whispered, please, we can fix this. She's your sister. I stopped. I looked at the grand staircase, the polished floors, the heavy drapes that had kept the sunlight out for decades. No, Mom, I said, she's a liability, and you're the one who let her bankrupt us emotionally for 30 years. Where will she go? Lisa asked, tears finally spilling over. I don't know, I said. But she has a year to pay back the $125,000 before Edward files criminal charges. I suggest she starts selling her handbags. I walked out the front door, into the Savannah heat. For the first time in my life, it didn't feel suffocating. It felt like a baptism. The humidity wrapped around me, heavy and real, washing away the cold, sterile air of that house. I wasn't just leaving a building, I was evicting a lifetime of ghosts. I didn't move into the mansion. I sold it. I sold the silver, the antiques, the heavy furniture that smelled of judgment. I bought a loft downtown, clean lines, modern art, sunlight flooding every corner. No shadows, no secrets. I used a portion of the inheritance to seed a scholarship fund for girls in STEM who don't have family support. I named it the Thomas Protocol. 6 months later, I was sitting on my balcony, watching the river. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the DNA lab, an automated reminder to download my data archive before it expired. I opened the file one last time. Probability of paternity, 0%. Ashley thought that number was a weapon. She thought it would sever me from my roots. She didn't understand that roots aren't just where you come from, they're what you choose to hold on to. That test didn't break me. It liberated me. It proved that everything I had, my place at the table, my father's trust, my future, wasn't given to me by biology. I had earned it. They tried to bury me in shame. But they didn't know I was a seed. If this story resonated with you, please share it. You never know who needs to hear that family is a choice, not a sentence. Don't forget to follow for more stories of truth and resilience.